Okay, so you guys can see me and the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So once again, thank you guys for joining us. And especially in these times, we first want to wish you and hope that you are healthy and safe. And part of the reason why I wanted to do the session, and one of the main motivations, is that we believe that, especially in these times, one of the most important things you can do is to let other people know they're not alone. And we understand that there has been a lot of communication about scams, and unfortunately, people taking advantage of each other with the stimulus packages going out. So we want to make sure you understand that you're not alone, that there are others who are in the same position as you, and that there are ways to protect yourself as well as to get help. Now, before COVID and this crisis hit, cryptocurrency scams were actually rated by the Better Business Bureau as the second highest risk in terms of scams in 2019. And a lot of these scams, or a lot of the risks, did come from ICOs, but there have also been a number of other issues. And so on this, or in this session, we're going to talk about and focus on two types of scams, because I know that there are many types of fraud going on. But we'll talk broadly about institutional fraud and then go into more detail on impersonation fraud. Now, in terms of fraud, here is just an overview of, from an institutional perspective or a banking perspective. There are a number of exchanges that enable people to use their bank accounts, Visa or MasterCard, but it's not clear that these banks know where these exchanges are registered or have some kind of AML or KYC in place. And in amongst regulators, there has been increasing enforcement of regulation and guidance put out by FinCEN and other regulators. And as an example, earlier this year, a bank, Safra in New York, was issued a cease and desist order because of their issues and their lack of reporting on AML. In addition, most recently, there have been class action lawsuits filed against crypto companies for unregistered securities. And so there's many types of regulatory enforcement, different types of fraud that are on chain, such as darknet related fraud, terrorist financing, ransomware, fraudulent hosted wallets, exchanges that have had a history of scams, tumblers and mixers. There's been a number of articles around tumblers and mixers recently, and also what we're going to talk today about in terms of impersonation fraud and institutional fraud. So I know there are a lot of things that we could address, but we encourage you to reach out to us if there are special topics that you want to discuss, and we'll certainly have those sessions in the future. Now, one of the areas I did want to go into in terms of institutional fraud is that this fraud occurs across multiple chains. And as Dan and Hunter will tell you later, it also goes off from these chains to off-chain mechanisms. And so an example of this fraud across multiple chains is this case that we worked on with the FBI, where millions of dollars of Dash was stolen, and this Dash was then funneled into hundreds and hundreds of different Dash addresses, and also funneled through exchange brokers who then exchanged that Dash into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin Cash. Now, we were able to follow the funds as they went through these different exchange brokers, through these different Dash addresses, and into an exchange in another country, and that's where with the FBI we were able to identify the bank account associated with that fraudster, that thief. Now, what we do at Blockchain Intel is not just to trace these funds, but what I want to let you know is that there are companies like us who can trace these funds, but also at a higher level just identify where there is fraud, and in the institutions that you are doing business with, like exchanges and so forth, they will have this information in order to protect you from the scams and from the fraudsters that may be working with you or trying to steal from you. So what we do is provide software that automates the process of identifying this kind of fraudulent activity. And we do that through a risk scoring API. And that risk scoring API works on incoming transactions and addresses. I'm happy to talk to you further if you have interest in either using this software or talking to your institution about this. But what I want to do now is focus a little bit more on institutional fraud and talk about some recent developments. So there has been a plus token scam, and this is going back to sort of the ICOs and the token scams that were prevalent in 2019. And in this plus token scam, basically, plus token claimed to have a lot of assets and a lot of basically ability to return in investments, have a high return on investment. And the issue was they didn't. And what they effectively did was take all their investors' funds and then funnel them through different OTC traders and basically empty the funds out. Now, their liquidations caused a major drop in Bitcoin. And it was this, in the price of Bitcoin, and it was this kind of trend that we were tracking and something that we track at Blockchain Intel on a regular basis. So we took the same model of following this kind of market activity and applied it to other coins such as Dash. And this is where we found that there was a lender that heavily advertised their Dash lending offerings earlier in 2019, sent a lot of communication around how Dash was the number 2 option for collateral. And then we found that as the price started to drop a bit, it was natural for them to, for the market to change. And unfortunately, in this case, the lender liquidated quite a bit of Dash. And as a result, that caused the price to drop even further, which enabled them to liquidate even more Dash from their borrowers and then see the market rebound. Now, what I just wanted to go into further a little in more detail is the timing of things. And this is what you want to watch out for and also be aware of as you do some more different types of lending, especially in these times, right? So if you see certain occurrences happening, be wary, especially as you can see in this case, right? The lender received a lot of Dash in collateral. They sent margin notices, liquidated, and then as a result, there was really rapid activity on the exchanges, and they were able to then liquidate everything. Right? And this has happened again, and there have been other recent cases of that, especially given the market crash of late. And so what you want to do is understand that this can happen. There also can be manipulation, or the institutions can be at fault, and class action lawsuits can be filed. And especially if you are working together with others, understand that you're not alone. And if you do feel like you've been, especially in this example of Dash, been wrongfully, addressed, then please contact us or the authorities. And if you would like to, on our website, contact us anonymously. So at this point, I want to just hand it over to Dan to share his experience and Hunter.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Karen. And maybe if you wanted to stop sharing your screen, and for the sake of the audience, go into the tab so we can see each other as we're having this conversation. So maybe we could do quick introductions to give people kind of a sense of what we're here for. My name's Dan Shields, and I'm the actual Dan Shields. There's, at least I hope I am, there's been a lot of imposters really that have purported to be me on various social platforms. So that's really why I'm here today, is to kind of tell the personal story of how this has been traumatic for me and for my friends group, and specifically some of the ramifications of like getting support might have helped change this, and being open and honest and reporting this kind of behavior might have helped stop with, as we'll get into a little bit later, maybe tens of thousands of dollars stopped from being pumped into these scams, right? So for me, I'm a community leader. I love building, right? Never stop building here. It's really what I'm passionate about is Web3 technologies and cryptocurrencies in general. So and because of this, I think I demand a decent amount of respect within the communities that I'm in. I'm also happen to be the admin of a whole bunch of different chat groups. So at least, and we'll go into the story of how most of these instances occur. They target me specifically as an individual because they know that I might have some kind of influence, and then pretend to be me and see how many different people they can potentially solicit money out of. So, but that's a little bit about who I am. And then before I get into the story, maybe Hunter, you could introduce yourself briefly and say hello to everyone.
Hey, yeah, so I'm Hunter, Hunter Trujillo. I'm local to Colorado as well. I've been a friend of Dan for several years. And, I also run my own consultancy, CryptoQuick, and I like to think I'm pretty technologically capable, but I still got hit with the scam, and I like to think I'm pretty. I've got my finger on the pulse of who's dealing with what. I mean, I've heard Dan was having issues with this. He was pretty clear about it on Twitter and Telegram, especially around the time of ETH Denver. I'm sure it was getting a bit more prevalent or risky back at the time. And I mean, I don't know if you're ready to go into the story, but I can. Yeah, okay. Well, so well, one thing. I mean, well, if you want to, I don't know.
Sure. I mean, I can tell a little bit more about generalities before we dive right into this.
Yeah, sounds good.
Like, so yeah, and Hunter, thank you first of all so much for being here with us today, because it takes a lot of courage to face the personal admission, right, that you fell for one of these things, and or been the target of one of these things in general. So thank you. But so how do these people do this, right? How do they target people like Hunter and many others of my friends who actively got hit by this guy? The platforms that I've seen it happen on, at least for sure, Discord, Telegram, Signal. I've also seen a little bit on Twitter, and I don't use it, but I've heard of people being impersonators of me on WhatsApp. But why these platforms, right? It is extremely easy to put up a profile that looks like just about anybody else, and it's almost impossible to report this to the admins of these platforms to get them removed. So, for instance, I think I've reported the same phone number, which is associated with a bunch of these scams, to all of these platforms that have any linkages to and I'd say maybe a month it took for Telegram to respond, and the person is still out there, right? They got marked, I believe, 2 months later as a scam, but they're still active, right? So they target these platforms because they know they can get away with it pretty much without any recourse, right? The other thing is on places like Discord and Telegram, this is a place that you can go to an open platform and join a group pretty freely. And this also happens on Slack, right? Where they get in and they can find out who's the admins and who's the friend groups of the admins, and then they can start targeting. So these open groups are actually really dangerous places for you to potentially become a target of this if you're friends with the administrators, especially here. So they'll hunt for the opportunities here and take advantage of that. So for instance, I know for a fact that we do a lot of outdoor adventure groups and things here with Cryptorado, as I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And I had reports of people telling them that I was out on a hike, right? And I didn't have signal, so I wasn't able to get on a phone call, but I needed money for this, that, or the other thing. And that was true. I was out in the woods, but they only found that out because they were on these open groups looking for this information. So they monitor these chats and they figure out when's the right time and what's the right way to manipulate you into giving them money, right? So the typical tactics that we've seen are that it's some kind of crypto deal, generally speaking, but it doesn't have to deal with cryptocurrencies necessarily, as we'll find out, right? Is that basically, the person like me, the pretending to be me, I'm in a pinch and like I'm trying to complete this deal. I just don't have enough money, like right at this moment. If you can give me the extra funds that I need right now, I'd be very grateful to you. Maybe I'll share some of that profit or whatever this particular over-the-counter deal is going on, right? Or especially, this is a time crunch, right? You're in a pressure, like you can't talk on the phone. Maybe this is a very sensitive deal, or you're out in the woods somewhere and you can't really make it happen. And it's got to happen right now, right? And then really, I think the cusp of all of this is this time bomb, right? So when they do eventually get spotted, right, and these tactics get found out, and potentially they get unearthed as a scammer, they'll go away, but they won't really leave. They'll be monitoring passively and come back and hit the same people again later. And that strategy seems to work, right? They'll hit the same groups over and over. So generally, be very, very suspicious if you're hearing anybody saying like, I'm in a rush and I promise like that I'll get back to you immediately, and that there's extenuating circumstances that I'm in desperate need right now, but I can't contact you in any other way. Like, just it has to happen now, pretty please, right? So if anything, slow down when anyone's asking you for anything to do with money, and think, right? Think that this is probably a scam, should be your first impression. And then from there, move into, okay, how do I verify that this is the actual person that they are who they say they are? So strategies to fight against this, I think we can go into after we talk a little bit more with Hunter here. But some of the outcomes of these attacks, specifically at me, I know of at least, and this is people I've heard of directly, 7 different people have been duped for at least a minimum of $30,000 have been stolen directly from people who are friends of mine, right? Who say, yes, somebody approached me and I thought they were you, right? So I gave them money. And so the thing for me is it's crushing. The analogy I like to use is, I don't know if you guys play MMOs, the RPGs. So specifically when I'm thinking about first person shooters, right? So you're in this game, you got all your friends and your buddies, and I'm going off somewhere. And the analogy I like to think of is I'm trapped somewhere and my friends want to come and help me. And there's a sniper out there who's broadcasting my voice in agony saying, come and help me. And then they're coming out of the foxholes to come and help me, and getting shot by this sniper, and I can't do anything to stop it. Like, it feels like that to me. So it's unbelievably crushing emotionally to see people get duped out of this stuff, because I can't help them. I don't know what's going on in the moment, and there's really nothing I can do but preventatively try and warn people that this might happen. But what's worse is that the people who I know have been hit by this have, whether they know it or not, withdrawn from relationship with me, right? Like, subconsciously, even though they know it wasn't me, I think it still hits them like, damn, it reminds them of this really painful event. And they also might be somewhat kind of suspicious, like, is that actually, did Dan just try and steal my money, like scammed me and pulled money away from me and is pretending it was a scammer? Like, there's so much nuance in like filthy, nasty emotional baggage that comes along with this stuff going through. So I've wasted at least a full week's worth of time over the past 3 or 4 months, like 40 hours plus, trying to report this stuff, trying to stop the stuff, trying to be alarmist about, everyone should, in my friend group should know that I'm not doing this stuff. So it's crushing. And I guess I implore you, if you think that someone you trust or know or love, right, is asking you for money, it's almost assuredly better to pause and to wait. And even if it is a real emergency and they need this time pressure, to step back and to verify and validate. And I would much rather personally have, not be able to get a deal completed or something like this that I needed money for, than have anybody be duped by one of these things. So please, don't trust, verify, right? And that's kind of my story and my personal my personal pledge or plea to you guys. So, Hunter, I kind of want to turn it over to you now, if you'd be willing to tell a little bit of your side, specifically kind of how this impacted you, and then we can jump into specifically some tactics to fight against it.
Yeah, so it's interesting when you're using a lot of these, communication mechanisms we're so used to. I mean, even text messages, you're almost kind of defaulting to trust. You like kind of like believe, it happens when your friends move their phone numbers, and you just, you don't bother to ever really ask their last phone number if they moved, because you're like, well, if they've moved their phone numbers, they're not going to either not get the message, or somebody else that you like who has that number now could get that message, maybe, because there's that shared pool of phone numbers, shared, but namespace. Yeah, but anyway, so I kind of track this back to where I get hit was in December of last year. I just look back. It's funny. I look back at the original text from this phone number after I kind of isolated it from what I understood Dan's identity to be, and I my contact, essentially. And this is just a phone number, and I mean, there you can get into methods of authentication and encryption all you want, but if you can't verify that person's identity, it could be as secure as you can make it. You can consider making it end-to-end encryption, whatever, right? Like, I mean, Signal does not help you here, and if I mean, to a degree, like Signal will sometimes tell you, this person is coming in from another number, but if you have it already as a contact in your system, it's almost like it's not sure if you'll either see that mechanism pop up and like understand its significance, and the real, I think the real frustrating thing, in hindsight, is just that, I mean, you look back and you're like, I saw so much, like, if I just processed, that this could happen to me. And what's unfortunate is that like people like me, like, we're, to a degree, we're so confident in our skills that, we don't really necessarily appreciate or humble ourselves to a degree that, yeah, this could hit us. This could hit anyone, including yourself, your own, very, skilled enough, more or less, hopefully, self, and I absolutely have to say, I mean, these are professional scammers. These are people who are basically doing it full time, you would imagine. And so, well, I mean, unless I'm doing, that as my job full time, I'm probably not going to be as good as them. But when I looked back, I I what happened is, so I got the text from Dan, and it's Dan, like, scammer. This person says, "Hey Hunter, it's Dan," and I reply like, which Dan? Like I'm thinking, like, I know a few Dans, and he says Shields, LOL, and like, first of all, I have to, like, when I think back, I'm like, this is not how I talk to Dan, like that's not how he sounds. And also, but the thing is, like, you're not always critical of that, or at least that voice doesn't speak, louder than what you're seeing. And um, I guess I'm just almost maybe naturally too trusting, I guess. I like to be, right? But, as you go through life and you get, a few, battle scars, you start to realize, there's some bad people out there, and they want to hurt the people you like and and, even the people you love. And so, what's, what and also what's interesting about my case is that I wasn't able to, arrange a crypto transfer, but I could arrange a bank transfer. And like it's really like the crypto is almost like a what they call a MacGuffin in the whole TV tropes aspect, where it's like this. It's not even related to the actual, not necessarily to the actual crime. And what's interesting is, I mean, if these are professionals, perhaps in another country, another jurisdiction, they're going to have means of expatriating funds of yours without recrimination. And so, what's so frustrating is that you want to kind of uh, retaliate. You want to kind of investigate. And fortunately, I knew once I started like really realizing, this is not the person I was thinking it would be, and that like this is what's happened. When I started realizing that, I immediately knew to stop. At least I had the wherewithal to just stop participating. Like, I mean, ideally you would block them, but to a degree, I was curious what else they would say. And I also make sure to disable read receipts to a degree. Maybe I just didn't want to give them any more information than they already might have. I mean, they already had from me. And I actually personally knew two other people who were caught up in this. One I think Dan knows, and the other person actually never really kind of. He, I mean, I hope if he's watching this, he kind of starts to feel less alone. And I, it's heartbreaking to see this happen to your friends, and it's I mean, the psychological and mental health aspect of this can't be understated. How you kind of have to go through a bit of an emotional journey in a sense, and usually when you go through emotional journeys like that, you wind up out the other side for the better, and it's always good to remember that. But it's hard to keep that perspective when you're just kind of dealing with your own thoughts and your own doubts. And so, I guess one thing that I was kind of even personally uncomfortable with, even just coming out about this, is that like, I mean, I feel like as somebody who has the name Crypto Quick as like which is actually kind of in hindsight not a yeah, but as like kind of like my brand, is it's kind of what I've kind of I feel like I would know a thing or two about cryptography and security, but there's a lot more to it, and there always is, than what you will know. And I mean, you can read about a lot of these things happening to other people, and hopefully you can protect yourself against SIM swap attacks and various other things you kind of like read about and you kind of prepare for. But the thing is, the security community is always learning new things, and I mean, essentially, it's sometimes the hardest lessons you learn that are the ones that stick. And I mean, to be honest, I would trust someone who's done a lot and been burned a few times than someone who's always like I don't know, I always been perfect, I guess. I'd imagine, because like there's that risk of complacency. And so, I mean, when I have regrets, I've always kind of considered, well, it might have been hard to have those regrets, and it might have, um, what you went through to have those is always hard to go through, of regrets of any kind. But the fact that you can actually have those regrets and appreciate them later is, to a degree, a badge of honor in its own right. And so, I mean, they regrets are just experiences that make you you as much as any other. And so, I know I'm going on a little long, but never underappreciate how the emotional and mental health part of this journey is just as important as, being vigilant and making sure you have, a strong network and warning your network and looking out for your friends. And that's all in addition to, what you might be able to do from a security perspective. But I mean, to be honest, Dan, and I mean, this, it's the identity problem is not something that is effectively solved by pretty much any tool most people use. I mean, we could basically shill Keybase all we want, but I mean, not many people use it. And what's the worst part is Keybase doesn't really always integrate well into other platforms that are generally less secure, that you can't even really think to trust. Or if you want to, kind of have some information available on Keybase, you can't do it really zero knowledge, because I mean, you would have to reveal, the phone number, unless we used actual like zero knowledge proofs, for example. And like I could, maybe ask Keybase if like somehow, or maybe not zero knowledge proofs because it's not even decentralized. But I mean, if you could just put in a phone number and say, is this it? But really, to be honest, that's other information that I think Dan could have easily given to me himself. But and the thing is, like, Keybase does offer you kind of a point of trust that you can kind of anchor a lot of your communications over. And I think that's one of the the value of the web of trust that it tries to promote. But I mean, these are all technological solutions to a much bigger problem that I mean, whether I ideally you can solve that with technology, but not every OPSEC, operational security problem can be solved through technology alone. And so,
yeah. No, so go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I was going to say maybe it's a good transition to the strategies and kind of the tips.
Right.
Completely agree there that it's not technology alone. And so what we did was just gather a few of the things that we have found and summarize that here. So I wanted to go back to kind of the institutional fraud that we talked about. So do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. And so the first thing is, so like we just talked about here, right? It's we're all doing this. We're all in this community because we believe that there is a future, is a very big future for blockchains, for cryptocurrencies, and we have to do our part in helping to move the community forward. And because we are in the infancy, on the institutional side, it is easy for certain large players to take control of the market, to effectively collude. As much as we'd like to, say right now it's completely decentralized. I mean, there is a way for that to happen, and so that's why, for those of you who are working in the industry, um, if you do see something wrong going on at your institution, to say something about it. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your company about it for obvious reasons, then definitely share this information anonymously with the authorities, with organizations like us, because we do work with law enforcement to make sure that actions are taken if needed, and only after very clear verification that there has been wrongdoing. And there have been cases recently where this has happened, right? And so um, class action lawsuits have been filed when there was very clearly some wrongdoing, and it's the Maker Foundation that has an issue, um, and that is continuing to unfold there. But it's something that we all want to you know just work together on and take a part of, and helping each other. And as we go into impersonation, just like what was talked here, there are a number of things that you'll want to do to verify before sending funds, verify through at least 1 to 2 channels outside of the original one that was used. Um, Hunter talked about Keybase, using Keybase for verification. And then I just want to very much emphasize, because we've seen this as we've worked with law enforcement in a number of cases here. If you've been a target, don't deal with the scammer or the fraudster directly, because like Hunter and Dan said, these guys are professionals, just like institutional fraud is committed by professionals. I mean, these are people who are clearly thought through a lot of things, and they have a lot of ways to, put you at risk. And they will probably continue to try to take money from you, to blackmail you. And all of that is an offense that can be, is a criminal offense that can be punished, right? So it's important not to put yourself in the line of fire directly with these fraudsters or scammers, but contact law enforcement or other organizations that can help put you between, and not be between the fraudster um, uh, and yourself. So um, and so at this point, I want to just hand it back to Dan and Hunter to add their color.
Yeah. Well, Karen, thank you for that. And I really am immensely excited by the service you guys are offering at Blockchain Intel to give people the ability to communicate some of this stuff in a more private way, right? Especially. So that's really important, because as you're seeing from my story and from Hunter's story, like it's so deeply personal and emotional, and it hurts really bad, right? And that giving someone the ability to try and seek help, like even if it isn't necessarily that you're going to get that money back. And to be perfectly honest, you probably are not going to get that money back for things like imposters, at least not in the very near term. There might be things like class actions that can come around and really help with that. But that's I'd say my call to action for everyone is we're going to give you some tips and tricks, as well as some tools to really go about dealing with imposters, especially because that's what at least Hunter and I are most familiar with. And at Blockchain Intel, you guys have a resource base as well, to be able to plug into for more the higher level institutional fraud and scams and things like this. But really, here is getting active about talking about it. It's okay, right? And if you have been hit by one of these, like you imagine like that personal feeling, that sinking feeling of like, well, shit, that hurts so bad. You can save other people from that horrible fate by helping bring to light that this stuff is going on. So the more that you're loud and active with the person who's trying to not interacting with the scammer, but those who can potentially stop the scammer, the less they are successful, right? So the return on investment for all the time and energy these professionals are putting in to try and steal money from people, the more that they're unearthed and the more that they're talked about, the less that they're likely to go ahead and continue their strategies. It's less returns for them, so they'll want to do something else. So that's what I would encourage everyone to. If you have been hit previously, it's okay to talk about it. And specifically, I'd say I'd invite you with Cryptorado. This is where it's something that internally we run all of our reasons that Hunter was pointing out is it's very easy to be able to verify and cross-verify identity of who you're talking to on this platform, as well as having end-to-end secure communications. So I might jump into some of the tips and tricks, but I don't know if you had any closing remarks or thoughts before I did that, Hunter, on kind of like the emotional impact and potentially how to succeed, in that.
Yeah, so I mean, usually a natural reaction to, once you realize that you've been, defrauded in such a way, is maybe fear, and fear for yourself or fear from reaching out, just isolation in general. And so, and that is actually, not a terribly healthy way to deal with that. And one reason why is because, I mean, you kind of think, to a degree, it's altruism, but also think, of the people you care about and your friends, that you wouldn't want them to go through your own experience, how awful that is. And I mean, although it's embarrassing, I mean, that's something the scammer is banking on, that you're going to keep their fraud hidden. And that almost makes you kind of a complicit to a degree, not legally, but just, I mean, what's neat is that you have a bit of power now. You have a bit of power to expose them. And it's something they don't really, that is like the only really good, decent recourse other than legal. And one thing I do have to say as an aside is, oftentimes, like, I mean, you would imagine that there are places in the world that, I mean, if, like, I mean, depends how much how illegal you did something, but I mean, you would imagine if you're professional enough to do this and attack so many people in the way that they did, and expatriate funds from the U.S. and use crypto, and that's I mean, these are bigger organizations doing this, and I can only assume, and so if that's the case, I mean, it's absolutely unrealistic to consider any other form of justice than just immunizing your own community and your own group of friends, those around you, your everybody you care about. And the way you immunize is just, I mean, let them know. You got to come out. You got to speak up, and that is your power in these sort of situations.
And so, Dan, just before you go on, I did wanted to add one more thing. So to that point about immunizing and sharing with your network, a couple things. One is there are specific groups that have developed to address some of these very heinous crimes, for example, ransomware. And so we'll send this link out, but there is a site devoted to helping those who've been impacted by ransomware. So it'll actually go through and say, is this the kind of ransomware that you've gotten? If so, do this, or contact this set of authorities, right? So there are sites devoted to this if you are in a situation. Now, to your point, Hunter, about sharing, right? This is why in the US and with regulators around the world, there is a practice of sharing suspicious activity information. So it's just called suspicious activity reporting. This is not meant to be, big brother, like watching you. This is really meant to share where there's been very bad criminals hurting a whole bunch of people so that these criminals can be taken down because they are professionals. And so sharing this information is a practice that has been occurring in other financial institutions for a while. It's not perfect by any means, as we know, not all things are perfect, but it is something that we're trying to extend here because we do just want to make sure that we all do our part in trying to move the industry forward, share where there is bad activity going on, and then help others, who have been affected. So yeah, just want to let you know there's this overall practice, and also that there are specific groups that are focused on different types of fraud, like ransomware and other things. Sorry.
Doing it for sharing all this information through blockchain intel and otherwise. Like, it's good to have these networks and mechanisms to fight these guys who really are pros. One thing, Hunter, before I dive into the
Okay, Dan, I think we might have a network issue with you. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting that too.
Maybe if we're having network issues, if you could send out the tips and tricks.
Are you able to hear me now? But any better?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So sorry about that. I must have a bandwidth issue here. But let me at least say to effect that really your most powerful weapon is getting out and letting people know that this has happened against these people, right? So don't let it all sink in and be on you and hide it from folks, because you're empowering and helping them continue to hurt other people by doing so, right? So for your own sake and for the sake of those who you don't even know, like the people like Hunter mentioned, that I don't even know how many people got hit by this stuff, and probably never will, right? Being empowered to talk about it so that the scope and magnitude can be seen, it helps empower people like at Blockchain Intel hunt these guys down. So
It's also important to remember that your interaction is just one data point of their crime, but that's all that you know during that time. And what you have to do is reach out to your friends or reach out to the community and wonder, is this common? Is this something that is happening more than once, or could it happen more than once? And that's, I mean, that's the bigger issue, is you don't always have enough information when you're hit by this and you feel isolated to even reach out.
Well, and the thing I really wanted to hit on is the point that I think you brought up as well, that these guys, if you continue to interact with them, are very likely to try and blackmail you and harass you about this. Be like, "Ha, I scammed you. Like, if you tell anybody, I'm gonna like let everybody know how bad that it was for you." And so like, don't interact with them and realize that this is a tactic. They want you to be quiet as much as possible. They're going to try and convince you to be quiet about this. So fight that. Don't interact with them and be open. And we're here to support you as a community, right? So that's, in fact, that's what I would like to transition into. I'll share my screen and let me know if you can't see this, because I just wanted to give people a sense of this. I'd be very happy to invite you to join our Cryptorado channel. So I'll send this out with some information to those who RSVP'd as information how to join this. But Keybase as an application, specifically, it has end-to-end encrypted chat as well as a bunch of other stuff. But the chat is probably one of the more important features, so that we know that we have secure communications with anybody we're talking with on the platform. But the key killer feature is the profiles of those who are on Keybase. So for instance, I'm Nukeman Dan on Keybase, and I always point people to the source of truth for my identity and for communicating with me on a platform that you know it's me is this, because you can immediately check that I've got all these linked profiles to my account. So all of these actually map directly to a public proof, right? For instance, this is Twitter of that. I say this is me on Keybase, and this happens to be on the Twitter platform that anybody can verify. So back on Keybase, you know that when you get this little check mark, right, that is actually live. It's up on the internet and it's viewable by everyone. And the cryptographically, the signature that I've written here out here, it's doing a check to make sure that that's correct. So with all that, you know that I own that account. And this is my profile. So if you're chatting with me, I own these accounts. At least you can check in real time that those things are still up. So as one of the tools to verify who you're talking with and be secure in talking with them, this is one of the go-tos that we have. And in particular then, Cryptorado, I think is the place I'd like for you guys all to be aware of. You can join us here and in the chat that we have available. This is a great place to ask for tips and tricks and to get more comfortable with some of the things that can help guard against, especially imposters, as well as then how do you get connected to better resources like Blockchain Intel and some of the other events that are going on outside of just scams and stuff. We do some pretty fun things that are all related to cryptocurrency and blockchain and whatever you'd like to be chatting about. So just want to put that out there. Please join us in Cryptorado. We'd love to have you.
And then we also have a set of contacts, so I'll just share that really quickly here. And please join us for a number of events that we're planning as well outside of the ones that we have talked about here. And I encourage you to go to our website, Blockchain Intel. We're also doing this in concert with Blockchain by Women, which is another education group, and having a series of events. So these are our websites. We have another event next week on the stimulus and regulation and the impact to cryptocurrencies and digital currency. So encourage you to come to that, and hope to see you in the future.
Awesome. Well, so then I figure that this would be a great transition to get to the networking section of our event here. So, and I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen if you want to stop sharing yours, Karen.
Okay.
So for those who are watching on YouTube now, this is what you should be seeing in the main stage area. Is right now you've got this live stream that everyone's watching here, and you can see who's all in attendance. So at this point, we're going to want to go ahead and transition over into the networking area. So in particular, when you go over into this networking area, right, or if you're on this Vertly platform, which, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, the link should be in the chat, specifically for being able to join us here for this conversational section. So once we're here in the main stage, we're all going to transition over to the networking area. So we go into the networking area. Here, you'll be able to see those who are in the networking area now available for conversation. And so, for instance, Hunter, I'm going to pick on you, at least to start, right? You can start a conversation with anyone who's available. And once we've started a conversation, you'll see that here in the Conversations tab, ongoing conversations that are already actively happening. So, for instance, now, oh, it looks like Karen's just about to join me here. Hey, I see you there. Yep, that'll work. So for those who are watching, then yes, the conversations, you can go ahead and join this conversation with us. So I think at this point, we're going to go ahead and cut this off and jump right into networking. So come join us in the networking area and find the conversation to join us. And then let's see, I want to stop.